So as we just heard, Korean officials are making all-out efforts to strike a deal before the trade deadline set by U.S. President Donald Trump ends on Friday. For more on what to expect, we're joined by Dr. Stephen Noerper, president of Asia Dialogue. Dr. Noerper, thanks for joining us this morning.
Delighted to be back. Thank you.
So South Korean officials have yet to reach a trade deal despite recent talks in Washington. What exactly is the United States seeking from South Korea?
Well, the United States is seeking a few things. One of them is forward movement. You've just heard about the shipbuilding deal, and that seems to have fallen on very eager ears in the U.S. administration. It is something that Donald Trump has expressed an interest in since he visited a Korean shipbuilding facility in 1998, and he feels that South Korea can help modernize U.S. ships, and already there are several under repair in Korea, but to help revitalize U.S. port abilities in this regard. And so South Korea could lend that expertise and really help encourage the U.S. capacity in shipbuilding. Beyond that, of course, they want more open markets, especially for U.S. agricultural goods, in particular for beef. And they would like to see South Korea engaged in an investment fund, not unlike that which they struck with the Japanese at $550 billion. But they would see that in terms of perhaps energy as well as agriculture. Those are some of the things on the U.S. plate when it comes to the economic incentives. And I'm pretty confident that Seoul will get what it's looking for in terms of the 15% mark. We've just seen that with Japan and now with the European Union, and of course, South Korea, a primary U.S. ally and one that's been working hard to strike an agreement, should see some success in this regard.
I see, and like you just mentioned, Seoul appears to be considering the shipbuilding sector as a bargaining chip in the negotiations, while also showing some flexibility on the agenda, now indicating that agricultural products, like you mentioned, are also on the table. So do you see this as an effective strategy, and what might a possible deal look like?
It is an effective strategy in terms of something that approaches Donald Trump in a very personable way. It's something that he has, again, long been vested in. It's something that his Commerce Secretary has expressed enthusiasm about in terms of building or rebuilding America's prowess in terms of shipbuilding. And they look to Korea. It's actually something where Korea has developed a fundamental expertise. Of course, of central value to the Americans is try to counter China, which now has the world's leading shipbuilding industry and now has a larger naval fleet than the United States. So it would allow the United States to enhance its capacity through really critical South Korean assistance. And so we need to look at it from both the economic and the security perspective. And it's a way of further engaging the alliance and giving it new impetus, new rationale, as we have done over so many years.
Right, and South Korea's foreign minister is also expected to hold talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington on the 31st. So how should the Korean government address the burden-sharing issue regarding U.S. troops in Korea? Will security concerns also affect the ongoing trade negotiations?
Well, security concerns are certainly doing that. There's China, as we've mentioned, of course, a lot of concern about what's happened in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. Beyond China, of course, what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, in particular with DPRK assistance, which has been significant, at least by the admission of both Moscow and Pyongyang. And beyond that, global instability, concerns across the Middle East, et cetera. So having a firm security relationship and one that is bolstered by increased South Korean support is important to this administration. It seems that South Korean officials are prepared to pay more for sustaining U.S. troops on the peninsula. However, the reality is also that the U.S. will probably downsize troops over time on the peninsula, especially as they look at the Taiwan issue and as they forward deploy U.S. troops from the peninsula and they consider basing in other places that permit some flexibility. So we'll see some movement back and forth, not only with places like Okinawa and Guam, but perhaps some reduction. That's not to be interpreted as a reduction in terms of commitment to South Korea, but rather a modification on the part of the U.S. Department of Defense to address that concern. And so they're hoping that that takes care of that. But there will no doubt be a larger ask of South Korea, and it seems it's one that South Korea has prepared for.
I see. And President Donald Trump has been making it clear that he's putting American interests over those of U.S. allies. How do you think the Lee Jae-myung administration should manage the alliance with the United States over his 5-year term?
Well, the Lee administration has seemed to show some very good instincts in terms of playing a moderate line. Of course, the prior administration had reinforced Japan and U.S.-South Korea relations in terms of the trilateral coordination. That will continue, and the Lee administration has expressed its support in that regard. But we've also a lot of multilateral institutions across the region, of course, countries with common interest in democracy. We've mentioned Taiwan, there's India, Australia, New Zealand, all of those working with the United States, Japan, and Korea to strengthen the security situation in the region. And of course, a fundamental crux of it is this Korea-U.S. alliance, which has been so historic in its formation. So there's no doubt that there's enthusiasm also on the economic front. And so the real impetus now will be behind Korea's hosting this fall's APEC meeting, because economic security, especially after the concerns over tariffs and some of the to and fro that's occurred in both South Korea and the U.S. domestic calculus so far this year, will be South Korea out trying to provide an assurance and show the world its regional and global leadership capacity through APEC. So those are also important initiatives to address oneself to. And of course, there's the United Nations, which is out there to help the United States, South Korea, and others, especially on issues like North Korea in terms of moderation and good offices. So a lot of complexes that allow the U.S. And Korean allies to work to strengthen not only on the bilateral level, but in many-lateral and multilateral ways as well, to reinforce regional cooperation to address Korean and U.S. concerns.
I see. All right, Dr. Noerper, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions. Aloha and have a great day.